Hello, welcome to this session in this workshop here today. Thank you. Yay! We are going to use Gemini Cloud Assist to build a web application from scratch on Google Cloud. I'm glad you are here. You belong here. If you're tuning in on the recording, thank you for doing so. There's never been a better time to be a developer. We can accomplish so much today with modern tools, with the cloud, with AI. One person can do so much in one day today. The same amount of stuff that we could use a whole team of people would work on for weeks back when I worked in startups. Because I come from, my background is, my name is Martin Omander. I was born and grew up in Sweden. I live here in the Bay Area now. I worked in consulting, and I worked in 3 startups, and then I've been at Google, where I am a developer advocate. And if you want more of the kind of content that we are using here today, that we're doing here today, you should tune in to Serverless Expeditions on YouTube. This is a show where we publish an episode every Thursday about something to do with serverless computing. So, for example, top 3 pain points for serverless developers. We have content about all kinds of serverless computing, hosting REST API, building highly available serverless applications, understanding serverless relational data at scale, and so on. Please tune into this one if you can't get enough of the kind of content we're doing here today. So this is a workshop where you can follow along on your laptop, if you brought one. If you didn't bring a laptop, you can watch what I'm doing here on the big screen, and then do it yourself when you get back to your hotel or get back home. There's a piece of paper in front of you that has all the information, so you can run through the workshop by yourself later. That piece of paper will also be useful if you get lost at any point in the workshop. If you're following along on your machine, at the end of this workshop, you will have a cloud project in your personal account, and there you can experiment and continue playing with Gemini Cloud Assist, the stuff that we will get you started on here today. If you get stuck at any point, have a look at that piece of paper in front of you. If you're still stuck, raise your hand, and a TA will come and help. We have with Luke, Sarah, would you raise your hand? And Dawn, please raise your hand. Yeah, Luke, Sarah, and Dawn will come and help you if you raise your hand. We're going to set up some credits first. I'm going to show you how to do that. The instructions are on the piece of paper as well. But first, I will just let you take a minute to set up your laptop if you haven't already. We'll be doing everything in the browser. You might actually be able to do this even on a tablet, if it has a decent browser on it. Yeah, somebody's trying there, yeah. Do let me know how it goes. It should work, yeah. And if you don't know the Wi-Fi details are on the back of your attendee badge. All right, I see a lot of laptops are up. I think that means we can start going through the process for getting the free credits for today's workshop. So first off, if you're signed into multiple Gmail accounts, now is a good time to go to gmail.com and sign out of your accounts, just so that we make sure that the credits you're going to get, the Google Cloud credits, end up in the correct account. If you only have one Gmail, if you only logged in on one Gmail account on your machine, no need to log out. Then please go to this URL. This is also on the sheet of paper in front of you. This will start the process of putting a few dollars of cloud credit in your account. I will leave that up there for a minute so you have a chance to catch up and enter it in your browser. Very good. I'll go on. If you didn't catch this link, it's on the paper in front of you. If you did enter that link in your browser, you will see a page that looks something like this. There will probably be a sign in with Google in your top right. So click that one, and then sign in with the account you would want to use today. It'd be great if you have a Gmail account. If you have a corporate Google account or a corporate or an educational Google account, this whole credit thing and cloud might not work. We've seen in previous workshops, it works best if you sign in with a Gmail account here. Then the next page after that, there'll be a button that says, click here to accept your credits. Yes! Great, we want credits. Click that button. And we're almost done with getting the credits, I promise. Just one more screen. Here, we just make sure that you're applying in the correct account. And then there's a big blue friendly button at the bottom there. Click that one to accept the terms and continue. That will actually put the credits in your account. Let's go on. Next, you may end up on console.cloud.google.com when you click that blue button on the previous screen. If you didn't, that's okay. Just go to console.cloud.google.com in your browser. What we want to do here is to create a new project. You got the, your billing account, but now we want to create a new project that will be our sort of sandbox, our playground for the AI stuff we're doing here today. So you see there at the top, there's a drop down. It may say, on your machine, it might say no organization, or it might say something else, but it's right there at the top next to the Google Cloud. At the top, click that one. When you click that, you will get the, what's it called? Select resource pop-up. And in here, we'll click to actually create the new project. So please click that button. We're almost done with setup. We will start with the lab, I promise. We'll get there. Here, you'll get to give a name for your project, call it whatever you want. And then you see there the second one in the billing account. Make sure you have the trial billing account selected. It's probably pre-selected on your machine, but if it isn't, click that thing and select the trial account. That's the one that has your free credits in it. And then click Create. And it may take a minute to create the project on your machine. All right. I hope you've had a chance to click Create. If you got lost at any point, look at the piece of paper in front of you. You can catch up with the help of that. But now, let's actually do the lab. This is the fun part. We've done all the credit. So the lab is at this link. It is also on a on the piece of paper in front of you. I'll leave this up here a minute so we can get a chance to go here. All right. I hope you have had a chance to go there. Now we're going to do the lab. When you click that link, you ended up on a page that looks something like this. This is a code lab written by my coworker Roman. It's a tour of Gemini Cloud Assist. That's what we're going to do today. So first, the first page you're on is just an introduction here. This goes through what we will do. So we will use the Cloud Shell IDE. We'll ask general questions about Google Cloud. We will also ask Gemini Cloud Assist to write some code to explain some code for us. And we'll ask Cloud Assist to write some code for us. By the way, we will use the Cloud Shell IDE here. Some people prefer to work on their local machine with VS Code or IntelliJ. Others prefer to work in the Cloud IDE, because then all developers in the organization will have the same setup. We'll use the Cloud Shell IDE. That also means that you should be able to do this code lab on a tablet. All you need is a browser. All right, so we're done with that. Let's click Next and start going through actually do the code lab. Setup. All right, so this will be a good time to have let's see, make this bigger, to have console.cloud.google.com in one tab and to have these lab instructions in another tab. So if you don't have console.cloud.google.com in another tab, now is a great time to set that up. So this is what it looks like on my machine. I have this set up here. My project, console.cloud.google.com in one screen, on one tab, and I have the lab instructions in another tab. All right, let's start going through the lab. So first, it says enable Gemini for cloud in the cloud project. So the lab instructions say to click this little button up here. This is the Gemini button. You'll see in many places in the UI today, you will see this little star-like icon. That stands for Gemini. So we'll click that one. It opened up straight up for me. For you, it might say something about there might be an enable button. If you see an enable button, click that. It might say something about required APIs. Click enable, and then it'll take a minute. And then you will get to this, where you have the Gemini sidebar. So once you have the Gemini sidebar, you can ask it questions about Google Cloud. What I really like about this one is that Gemini Cloud Assist has read all the Google Cloud documentation, so you don't have to. It's a lot of documentation. So we could say, for example, ask, what is the difference between let's say Google Cloud Functions and Cloud Run? Both are serverless platforms. I get this question a lot. A lot of people ask this on my YouTube channel. Now I don't need to come up with an answer myself. I can look it up here. It takes a minute. And here we get the breakdown of like both of them are serverless. Here is like different language support. It calls out and compares and contrasts. It even shows us a nice little table here. So this is a great way of navigating the different products. And if you have any questions about the documentation, that documentation would answer. It's often faster to just ask Gemini here than to go and find it yourself. All right, that was the first part of this step. If you scroll down in the lab notes, in the lab, in the other tab, you will get to a section called Enable Gemini Code Assist in Cloud Shell IDE. This is the Cloud IDE we're going to open, the integrated development environment, up in the cloud. So to do this, the lab instructions say to go to ide.cloud.google.com. ide.cloud.google.com. Now it's actually provisioning a Cloud Shell machine, a machine just for you, for each one of you. So this will take a minute because it is setting up a machine just for you that runs the integrated development environment for you in the cloud. I recently started, so it was probably a bit quicker for me than it might be for you. I will be quiet for a minute and let it run and set up on your machine. You should get to something similar to what I have here. So here, above this horizontal line, we have the IDE, we have files, we can go into a file explorer here. This looks similar to VS Code that you might run on your local machine, except it runs in the cloud. And here we have a command line, so we can run regular command line commands there. Now, the next step in the lab instructions say that we should click Sign In, Cloud Code, Sign In button. So we will authorize Cloud Shell. And now it will say Cloud Code, no project. So now we have signed in. And we can click here again to select our Google Cloud project. This will log the editor into our project. So this was the project I was using. You should pick the project that you created when we set up the credits. So now the Cloud IDE is logged into, authorized into my cloud account, in my Google Cloud project. Down here on the lower right, there is a Gemini, that little Gemini star, but you see that? It has a strike through it. So that means that Gemini has not been enabled for this project. Luckily, it's easy to fix that. Just click that. We'll need to tell Gemini Code Assist the context it should work in. So we'll tell it to work in the context of this project. I've picked the same project. So now we have Gemini is nice and enabled down here. Very good. So we have project name here in the lower left. And in the lower right, we have Gemini enabled. If we go back to the lab instructions, we have now done the entire step number 2. Time for step number 3. So click Next to go on to step number 3. Here we will create our sample application. It's a web application. A Python Flask application is what we're going to create. So the instructions say to go down here and click the project name. So let's click that. And then we get our drop down here, various things we can do. the lab instructions tell us to click New Application. So I'll click New Application. Lots of choices. Do we want a Kubernetes application? Do we want Cloud Run? I like serverless computing. I'm going to pick Cloud Run application. By the way, Cloud Run lets you run containers in Google Cloud on the Google Cloud platform. You just build your container or ask Google to build your container, and then Google scales up and down with your traffic, so you don't have to deal with all of that. It's like it's a very nice serverless offering. So Cloud Run application, we want to build a Python Flask application. And here we go. It suggests a directory name for it, Hello World 1. That's OK with me. So I click OK here. If there are any pop-ups here in the lower right, click the X to get rid of those. So here we have the README for this. And over on the left here, we see that we got a whole starter application. I really like starting a new application this way, so I don't have to remember, which are the 10 files I need to have to bootstrap a new application in the cloud. By the way, if you were, you might have been signed out. I was signed out when this happened. So then just click sign in here in the lower left, and everything is back again. That was the end of step 3 in the lab. We have now ended up here. These are the lab instructions. And here we see the README file. So let's go on to step 4. We are going to chat with Gemini. So let's go back to the Cloud IDE. So out here we have like the File Explorer, we have search, we have source control, we have all these things that you might have seen if you're running VS Code on your local machine. They are up here in the cloud. And look at that. We have the Gemini star. So let's click that one and see what happens. Now we have Gemini. We can talk with Gemini Code Assist, but in the context of our project. So we can ask, just like we asked Gemini before, previously, we can ask it any questions, like what is Cloud Run, for example? And it will tell us. So again, in the context of your code here, it will answer our questions. By the way, if you feel that Gemini Code Assist gets sort of stuck, it remembers what we talk about. So if I ask a follow-up question, that's OK, it understands. If you feel like Gemini ever gets stuck and you want to reset the context and sort of back out and start from the beginning, you can click this little trash can icon here and it will reset the conversation. Gemini will forget whatever you talked about before. That was step number 4, chat with Gemini. We've gone through this whole thing. Let's go on to step number 5, code explanation. So a lot of us inherit code from others, or we work on a team where others write code. It's not always easy with what were those guys thinking of when they wrote this code? It's very useful to have somebody explain code to you. I find it super useful. So let's ask Gemini for help with that. the instructions tell us, the lab instructions tell us to open the File Explorer and open Docker file. So again, Docker, I know how to use Docker. I know enough Docker to be dangerous. Docker, by the way, containers. That's what you deploy to Cloud Run. We created a Cloud Run application here, so there's a Docker file. But I'm always a bit uncertain, like what is what? What does what mean here? For example, entry point, I actually don't use that in my Docker files. So if I'm ever uncertain about any piece of code, I can just select it, like I did here. And then there's a little light bulb. And I can ask Gemini to explain this. Let's see what it says about entry point in a Docker file. Here it is. Entry point specifies command that would be executed when the container starts. Oh, okay. So when this application starts, Docker is sort of running Python app py for me. That's how the container starts. Good, good. And it shows some examples of that. It even tells me a bit about this other related Docker commands, like the cmd instruction. That can be a default command. So this is useful when you're dealing with configuration files, but also when you're dealing with code files. Because next in the lab instructions, they tell us open app.py. There can be a lot of weird code hiding in source code files. For example, let's say that we're not familiar with these two lines. There's something going on here. I'm not quite sure. It looks like maybe some environment thing. K_service, K_revision. Okay. The person who wrote the comment here, it wasn't super helpful. The comment just says, get Cloud Run environment variables. Okay. But what are these variables? Well, we could either look it up in the documentation, or we know somebody who has read all the Google Cloud documentation. Gemini Cloud Assist has read all the docs, so we don't have to. So we can just click the little light bulb and go explain this. Let's see what it comes up with. Okay, so here's the breakdown of the code. Gemini says, K-service. The K-service environment variable contains the name of the Cloud Run service that's running. Oh, okay. That was probably in the docs somewhere. Didn't have to look that up. And then it says here K-revision. That's an environment variable, and it contains the revision number of the Cloud Run service that's running. And then it tells us a bit about how this code works. So if this environment variable has not been set, then unknown revision will be returned here. So that's a good way of asking for specific lines of code that you're uncertain about. Sometimes, though, you just open a new file and you want an overview of what is going on in this app.py file here. So we can go out here and we can say, explain this file. And here it tells us about imports. It tells us how the Flask application starts up. It tells us the routing, the hello function. I like this. When I get code that I haven't written before, I like to just have an AI explain that code to me so that I get an overview of it. That's far faster for me to read this English than to try to understand the code, especially if I'm working in a language that I don't use every day, like Python, for example. I mostly write Node.js code. Another neat thing about Gemini Code Assist is that it always tells us what the context is. So here the context is really simple. It is only looking at this file. But the context could be more files. If you have other files open here, it could look across files as well. All right. That was step number 5, code explanation. Let's go on to write some code, not just explain it. Generate code with prompts is the next step. So click next, and you should be on step number 6 in the lab. What this tells us, it tells us to create a new file, utils.py, and then it tells us to enter a comment that describes what this code should do. So let's do that. We'll enter and create a new file, utils.py, very nice. Then I just copied this comment from the lab instructions. I always have a hard time remembering exactly how these client libraries work, exactly how to use them. Before large language models were widely available, I would have to go to another project of mine and look, how did I access Google Cloud Storage buckets? Don't have to do that anymore, because now we can do control, enter, control the return, and Code Assist will generate a suggestion for us. So I click Tab to accept the suggestion. Let's see, we'll remove that. So now we have a code that takes a bucket name as input, and then it gets all the blobs, so all the files in that bucket, and then it prints them all out. Excellent. There are some squiggly lines here, though. What's up with that? If I hover over it, it says use with caution. This is a pretty neat feature, I think, because this tells us where this code comes from and what license there might be attached to it. So here you can just accept it, accept the citation warning. Maybe you're OK with Stack Overflow code. Maybe you're OK with GitHub code that's public. But it's always good to know, where does this come from? We want the source, the citation. All right, so we have our little function here. We could, of course, enter other. You might want to try to enter other, type something else here, a function that does this or that. Do control enter. Or we can ask for code out here as well, and then paste it in to the editor. We are not going to do that right now, because we have just finished step number 6. Look at that, 6 out of 8 steps. Yeah, we're doing well. Citation warner, very good. Let's go on to step number 7. That is get inline code suggestions. So here what it tells us is that if we start typing code, it will help us autocomplete. So for example, we could start at the top here, and the lab instructions say like import something, and it suggests imports that might be useful. We could also go to the bottom of the file and say, let's say we want to call this list blobs function. It will autocomplete that for us. If you're doing this, by the way, we're going to run this code in a minute. So let's pick a bucket that actually exists and that is public, so we can run it and see what happens. I've created a bucket that's public that calls Martin's data files. Let's enter that. And then let's see if we can run this thing. By the way, just to those of you who've worked with Python before, know that we need to install some dependencies. They are in requirements.txt. We will need to add a dependency in requirements.txt, we need to add a dependency for Google Cloud Storage. That's just so that, that calling Google Cloud Storage will work. We need to use that library. Once we've done that, and everything I'm telling you here is in the lab instructions as well, but once we've done that, we can open a new terminal and actually install all these libraries in our development environment. This is similar to an npm install if you're doing Node. So we'll just open a new terminal. Very nice. There we are. We're in the Hello World 1 directory already. So we'll just do pip3 install -r requirements.txt. This will install all those libraries for us. Let's see if it works. Yeah, it's certainly printed out a lot of stuff. I'm more of a Node person than a Python person. I assume this is good. I don't see any error messages. Let's actually run that code. So remember, we're going to run utils. This is our auto-generated code. What happens here is a function is defined, and then at the bottom we actually call that function. That's what happens when we invoke utils.py. Let's do that. Let's clear this first, and then we'll say Python utils.py. Let's see if it works. Yeah. So here are 4 random files that are in my Martin's data files that I uploaded before. If you run this, you will hopefully get the same result I did. So now we've actually reached the end. This was the end of step 7. And if we click next here, step 8 is just congratulations, and we've earned a learning badge. And you can set up a profile here that keeps track of the badges you have and which code labs you've gone through. So now you know how to write code that runs on Google Cloud Platform without having to memorize the details. And I find this useful for 2 reasons. One is when I work in a programming language that I'm not super familiar with, like Python for me, then I get help from Code Assist. And the second reason I really like it is that typically the code you run in the cloud ends up using databases, BigQuery, cloud storage, Firestore, Vertex AI APIs. It's always a bit tricky to remember how to call those APIs. But as we saw here, Code Assist can pull all that in for us because it has read the documentation, so we don't have to. So feel free to take this project and continue experimenting on it on your own after this. I find that we're in a really interesting time in computing. I thought back, actually, as I was biking in today, I thought back to in the late 90s. I used to have a personal digital assistant, a Palm Pilot. I don't know if you remember. Did anybody have one of those? Okay, we have lots of hands. Excellent. So it was really hard in the 90s for a computer to understand a human. It was really hard for a computer to understand human writing. So it didn't understand if I wrote just like normal handwriting. it actually was easier at the time to teach humans to type, to write in another way, different letters than we are used to. I see some nods, yeah. Because computers weren't that smart. Now computers are much smarter and we can collaborate with them more as equals. We don't have to adapt to them, they adapt to us. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.